Hey there, welcome back to another episode of While We Were Working. This is episode number 107, and we are the show that helps you become a better people leader while talking about topics you may not have been thinking about because you were busy working. As always, I'm joined by my awesome co-host, Summer Ketron, who's here in studio for this recording. I'm so grateful that she's here, and we've got a great episode for you today. We are going to be talking about Forrester.com's predictions for 2024, since we're at that time of year. And if you want to check out our episode 106, we talked about predictions from a law firm. So this will be a different angle. And then our Consultants Corner question is about camera on, camera off. Is that a deal breaker for working in your business? Can it be? Should it be? If it is, what do we do if someone doesn't want their camera on? We've got a great show, so let's jump into it. Summer, let's go ahead and get started with Consultants Corner, with While We Were Working. Let's start there. Let's not change the format we had for the past few years. Let's go ahead and do While We Were Working.
All right, let's do it, Joey. And thanks everybody for joining us today. The article we're going to talk about was from Forrester.com. And as Joey mentioned, it's predictions for 2024, an EX, which is employee experience, recession, and an AI revolution reshape the future of work. Now, if you've been following our pod, or really anything happening in the HR people leadership space, there's been so much discussion over the past, 2 years or so about employee experience and artificial intelligence. So I thought there could not be a better topic to be wrapping up this year's pods than, to kind of reflect on what those challenges in prior years are, and how that's leading us to the 2024 predictions.
Yeah, and there are no two bigger themes. I feel like this is like if HR had like a Marvel cinematic universe, right? You'd have like Gen AI, which would be like Thanos, and then you'd have employee experience, which would be, the Avengers, and that's the extent of where my analysis will go. But these two competing things in the workplace, which they can and should be complementary, but many organizations may decide to get one versus the other ramped up, and if that's Gen AI, it can come to the detriment of our employee experience. I don't think it should, and I know we'll dive into this a little bit more, but yeah, unfortunately, I think that's where we'll go. What do you think, Summer?
Yes, I think we get right into it. And before we dive into predictions, I think it's important to reflect on the wild year we've had. I mean, there's been so many challenges in 2023. And a couple that are highlighted in this article, I think, are those that we have seen, heard, and felt the most. I mean, everybody's talking about inflation and how much it's eroded buying power.
Yeah.
And from an employer and employee standpoint, we've seen that translate to compensation renegotiations. We've seen hybrid work adjustments due to the return to office mandates. That's been a super hot topic.
Yeah.
And we can't ignore external factors like the climate impacts and the multiple wars that have reshaped work conditions. And, if that wasn't enough already, Joey, we had, employee strikes, walkouts, and, non-compliance with employer policies. And, what that's really kind of, compounded by is that there's been this big question mark from employees around their employer's commitment to employee experience. I mean, you think about back when we were in COVID, there was such a investment in time, money, and effort in employee experience. And I think employees are at a place now, Joey, where they're really, really questioning their employer's commitment to employee experience going forward. So, we're seeing that in those, strikes, walkouts, and non-adherence to policies.
Yeah, I think that this season that we're in for the business climate, we really have to ask ourselves if humans are our most valuable asset, our most valuable resource, as we've often seen as a platitude. Because I would argue that many employers don't find that humans are their most important resource because there are so many things that employers are willing to compromise on that relate to the employee experience at work. I mean, what does it say here? Just looking at DEI investments are expected to fall not by 20%, but to 20%. So whatever that number is now, it's just basically saying that DEI programs will become performative with a shift towards check the box. Whereas if you would have asked me, July or August of 2020, is DEI an important thing? I would have said yes. And I have literally said this, but like when I would speak with prospects, a major determining factor if they will work with us is our position on DEI. If we had a member of our team that could support DEI issues, but I gotta say, Summer, it doesn't come up as much as it did in those years. And it's not to say that our groups don't care about it, but it is to say that it isn't a qualifying item as much as I had seen in the past. So this whole, situation or condition that we're in right now, the pendulum is definitely swinging for most employers towards, not even being an employer, but being, a machine enthusiast or a tech enthusiast. And we've got to figure out what that's going to mean for employees and how we can help employees win.
Yes, and I'll take another one, Joey. I mean, that was definitely really interesting and surprising to me in regards to the DEI specifically.
Yeah.
It is a huge shift, and it's a fast one. And it is important that we keep our eyes on these things because, if you are an organization who has made that investment in your DEI efforts, it would be, it would be such a shame and likely a disappointment to your team members if you were to be one of those companies to fall to that 20%. The next one, and we've spoke about this on a prior pod too, is AI and recruiting, Joey.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So no secret that this one made it on the 2024 predictions in this article. But as you can imagine, artificial intelligence is expected to bring what's called both magic and mayhem. I love that. Magic and mayhem in talent management and recruiting. And I think we're already starting to see some of that occur, that, with the heavy use of the AI tools, it can lead to miscommunications, misconnections, and I'm going to use the word mayhem, right? And it's anticipated that with the increased use of this, that, you're going to see a higher occurrence of things like individuals being hired for roles that they quite simply aren't truly qualified for, but they can present themselves as they do. And even potentially hiring non-existent candidates. Whoa.
Insert movie from the 90s that foretold of cyber chaos here. Right?
It's wild. I mean, we could probably go on and on about like this topic and expand on it, but it's one thing to hire an actual person who's used AI to exaggerate their experience and say the right things to land a job. But it's another thing that AI may be used to essentially create fake candidate profiles who then I can only imagine then potentially get hired
Yep.
and end up on payroll.
Yep.
And that's where the mayhem comes in.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen, kind of just anecdotally, even with some of the groups that we work with, uh, the assumption, or I'll say strong assumption, because we can't say proof or verification, but strong assumption of AI being used in the process of writing cover letters, of writing resumes, these sorts of things. And I'm waiting for the podcast, the documentary, the expose of some programmer in, Atlanta, Georgia, who creates this fake profile, who gets all these jobs from companies. And we're not too far from that, because how hard would it be for a developer to write a script that says, hey, I want to create an ideal candidate profile for AWS software engineer.
Mhm.
Go through LinkedIn and summarize the best resumes of or the best profiles of AWS software engineers, and then compile an ideal profile, and even it maybe a photo or photorealistic photo, and a realistic name, and other things. So it's very possible we're not too far off from that reality, or not too far off from that becoming a reality.
Mhm.
I like how this says, the magic and the mayhem, because we've already seen this before in other areas. Where, take social media, for example. Social media these days is less about being social, and it's more about how do I beat the algorithms, or how do I align with the algorithms to get my end result. The same thing we saw years ago when applicant tracking systems were new to the market, and we were telling, whether as career coaches, HR pros, whatever, we're telling job seekers, hey, you need to make sure you can beat the bots with applicant tracking, and make sure you have the exact keywords in your resume. So now we're just playing that game at hyperspeed. And for every job seeker who's going to cut corners, there are going to be recruiters who cut corners. And you say, well, did you do a phone screen? No. Did you verify the resume? No. Did you check sources on the application? No. And it truly is going to be magic and mayhem at a game that's being played at a very, very fast speed.
Oh gosh, I don't know how to top that, Joey. I mean, that was, that was some great commentary on that. I think to round out the 2024 predictions, I'll share just a couple of recommendations, really high level. I think, bringing us back to what we were talking about, the employee experience recession. There's, companies who have kind of abandoned that focused effort to develop their employee experience. And I think we already know that a mature, right, so a developed employee experience program can certainly drive team member productivity, can help with your turnover. And overall, it just creates a fantastic employee experience. And leaders, they're encouraged to invest in AI recruiting and skills intelligence to stay ahead, because if 2023 was any indicator, I think we're going to head right into 2024 with likely some ups and downs, but the tech is not going away. So I think to take a look at some of these as opportunities to stay the course, and just kind of weather whatever storm may be ahead for us.
Yeah, and I won't add anything else to this, because we'll jump to the next topic. But I think this season of work that we're in will, I mean, it's a big hypothesis of who's right. Is it focusing on employee experience? Is it leaning all the way into tech, or is it some balance? I think that we are at a level where tech is mature enough now where we can really see what is the ideal mix of talent and technology, and many different employers will come to their own outcomes. So it'll be interesting to see, and it'll be interesting for the groups that we work with, their approach to all of this. But let's go ahead. We'll jump into our Consultants Corner. So if you have a question for us on Consultants Corner, you can reach out to us at hello@jumpstart-hr.com. The Consultants Corner is where we give you the good, the bad, the ugly, life as an HR pro in the trenches, maybe what we're seeing with clients, maybe what we're seeing in the field, what we've seen in our own experience. So we'll give you some real life practical examples. This one, I don't think this has really been a thing before. Well, that's a lie. It was a thing before COVID, but it's just rolled out even more. Someone says the company has a camera on policy. So that means that if you're in a meeting, you gotta have your camera on. But an employee refuses to turn it on, saying that it causes anxiety. What is the best way to address this? So, Summer, we're not gliding into the holidays here. We've had 2 episodes of heavy hitting topics in Consultants Corner, and I always like to let you go first on these things. So why stop with tradition? You want to go with this one?
Okay, let's do this. Well, I think it's a great question because with so many companies utilizing video calls of far more than what we had seen, even just a couple of years ago, I think this is a larger challenge now than perhaps it has been before. And I'm willing to guess that most companies that do video meetings have encountered this challenge. Maybe not necessarily, specifically a team member that has anxiety, but just a team member who maybe doesn't turn their camera on as frequently as the company would like. And so, how do you address it? I think that's the question here. And how do you address it if there's additional complexities involved?
Well, I have a blueprint for these questions here. I always like to say, we'll start with what's in your handbook, and I know that this says that there's a camera on policy, but is it really and truly a policy, or is it a cultural norm?
Mm-hmm.
There are differences between policies and cultural norms, and if someone chooses not to do a cultural norm, then that's not against the rules. I think that you've got to evaluate, and it kind of ties into what we talked about in our last episode, but take a look at if this person has any medical reasons for wanting to take the camera off, and that conversation may need to be had either with HR or a manager that they trust. But also, quite frankly, they could be camera off because they're working another job. And I think we've kind of seen that before, where people are being double and triple employed, and not like main full-time job and then part-time job, but like full-time job 1, full-time job 2, full-time job 3. And there could be challenges with their schedule and alignment there. But the best way to address it, I think, is always to start with, well, what are we trying to accomplish? Do we want this person, to understand why we have cameras on? Are we trying to discipline this person? Are we trying to exit this person? Start with what your end goal is, and then look at the context around your situation. And Summer's got plenty other great things to consider in this environment too. So what do you think, Summer? How is the best way to address this?
Well, there isn't just one, but we like to share kind of tips and tricks for, how we handle most situations. And I think you started us off really solid with what do our policies say is required. So some companies do have a camera on policy. And in essence, those policies say, if you are joining a meeting virtually, you are to have your camera on. Of course, there are exceptions for, the occasional camera off. And I think by and large, team members understand that's the expectation, right? Like your camera's to be on for a multitude of reasons. But if you're not feeling well, or maybe, it just you need a break, like that's okay, but that's not the norm. So I think from an organization, you first have to make the decision as to whether you are going to have a policy and whether you're going to enforce the policy and what you've done in the past, right? Because we think about policies and how important it is to administer them fairly. So it's like, okay, we're going to crack down on this one team member, then you have to be prepared to do the same. And my test for that, Joey, when I'm talking to managers about it is, okay, this was your highest performing team member. Would you hold them to the same requirement? And sometimes they pause. Right? And really asking like, well, how far do you want to push this? Right? Because if it's, truly a situation where like it just gives somebody anxiety, like they cannot focus, like it really does impact them in a way that is not productive, then we have to ask ourselves, do we really want to push the employee to a place where they may be unhappy working here? So I always ask, how's their performance? Are they a high performer? Are they otherwise getting their job done? And if the answer is yes, it's like, okay, so like, can we continue working this way into the future? And just start to dialogue and have those conversations. And sometimes it takes a little bit of a different direction. Sometimes it's like, okay, well, let's talk to the team member and help them understand why it's important to us to have cameras on so that they can understand where we're coming from and try to meet in the middle.
Yeah, you bring up some great points. And as you're talking, I'm reminded of something else that was a big reason in the past or in the recent past, why people would have their cameras off. And that is because they were truly the primary caregiver of a child or children in their house. And so they didn't want to tip off their boss that was the case. Because obviously if you have camera off and you have your mute button on, then World War III could be happening in your house with your kiddos or animals or what have you. And so that's another aspect to have a conversation about with your team member to say, is it an issue or a concern of providing care to a dependent while you're on the clock? And if so, what does the policy say about that? Mm-hmm. And what sort of support can you have with giving that employee time to change course? The other piece too of why someone might have their camera off, Summer, is maybe they think their camera sucks, or maybe their camera is broken and they may need a repair of some sort. So I always think asking the question why they don't have their camera on is a good start too. Some people may not like looking at themselves, and so they don't want the camera on and seeing themselves. But you gotta have the conversation. You gotta have it as mature adults, and get a plan together of how you can tackle this.
Yes, I think some parting thoughts on that, Joey, from me is really helping the team member understand the why, because I think sometimes we move so quickly that we're quick to quote a policy and want to enforce without truly helping the team member understand, like, well, like, why is this important? And when I think about cameras and having them on, in absence of having in-person work, it is the way that we connect on a deeper level, that we build relationships on a different level. And we know that that is crucial to our success and what we can accomplish in a remote environment. So while I definitely think that there needs to be space created for those instances where team members absolutely can have their cameras off, the norm of having them on is something that I think is reasonable. But if you have team members who have certain needs or requests, to entertain those and try to find a middle ground, so that ideally in the end, team members will be happy, managers, teammates will be happy, and that's really the end goal in these situations.
Summer, the end goal is productivity. You understand? But in all seriousness, right? To balance the whole spectrum of people and productivity and all of that, I do know that building trust and confidence in your team goes a long way, and getting those cameras on, and also getting productivity goals reached. So, as much as it's about we've got a policy for this, think about, have I built the trust with the colleague to get them to have it? So I think this is a good place for us to land. And I think this is our last episode for the year officially. Next time you'll hear from us will be a episode for 2024. So thank you again for another great year. I think we charted in several countries, and it's always fun. But tell your friends about this episode and this podcast in 2024. And we'll see you later. Until next time, have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.